Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Good to welcome you back for day two of UK market missions. As you hopefully recall, I'm Pete Gillingwater, founder and CEO of Newfound and the MCO over the next couple of weeks. Before we sort of talk about today's mission, I just thought that it would be good to quickly recap on some of the great insights we got from yesterday's takeaways. The first one, obviously, with Anton Ruddenclough from KPMG, Martin Holman at Augmentum, and Lou Smith from Lloyd's of London. Where I think basically, the fintech economy, despite the COVID era, there's significant innovation opportunities, particularly in payments. The insurance industry, which I certainly learned a bit from Lou yesterday. There's massive potential there. And areas like asset management and digital identity spaces, there's lots of niches that are creating significant opportunities. And then, of course, Andy Wild from Edelman around public trust, to hear that fintech was at almost an all-time high of 64%, which is a significant increase on normal findings, shows that trust is very good for fintechs at the moment. But we know that there's a lot of effort required to maintain that trust. So in terms of what I was told by my team yesterday, I didn't mention about our social media channels. So by all means, use the hashtag Newfound Market Missions. And obviously, we're posting a fair amount on LinkedIn and Twitter. But obviously, please use that as you do. Now, today's session is really, I suppose, focused on the kind of support you get from both government and the fintech industry in general. And there is a lot, but of course, that support is a little complicated to figure out how, what, when, and who. And today's two sessions will hopefully enable you to navigate a bit easier in terms of working with various trade agencies and fintech organizations. So handing over to the panel, Paul Webster. He's Chief Executive of International Investment Services. He's, as you'll tell by his accent, an Australian national who's been in the UK for many years. He knows the fintech sector inside out. He's also done a ton of work bringing companies in from overseas markets. And joining him, of course, Deval Gore from London & Partners, which is the Mayor's International Trade Agency. And Deval heads up the International Business Program. Someone that knows so much about trade and, once again, done a lot of work in the Australian and New Zealand marketplaces, amongst others. In fact, he's done a lot of work recently across Europe as well. And then last but not least, Philippa Martinelli, who's a senior advisor and fintech specialist with the UK Department of International Trade. And once again, Philippa is someone that you should definitely know. So over to you, Paul. And don't forget, Q&A throughout the session. Please do that. And also meet the speakers. You must definitely find time to go and meet the speakers, because that one-on-one session could be invaluable for your future plans. So thank you very much, and over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Peter. Just doing a sound check to make sure everyone can hear me before I begin.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, beautiful. So as Pete said, today's format, we're going to start with a panel for roughly 40-45 minutes. We'll do a broad discussion, then we'll open up for an open Q&A briefly if we've got time left. And then in 45 minutes, the three speakers will each go off to their own meeting room, which you will have a link for. And by all means, jump onto one of those links, ask the questions you might have specifically for those speakers. And if we don't get time to address all of your questions today, please contact Peter or Harry, and we'll make sure that they will forward your questions to us, and we'll reply to you overnight, so you have those answers before you start tomorrow. So don't panic if you're trying to get to all three. You will get your questions answered over the next 24 hours, regardless. I'd like each of the speakers to provide a brief introduction of themselves and maybe a little quiz on naming how they've helped a fintech to set up here in the UK, who the fintech was, if they're allowed to say so, and what they did to create value for that customer. If I can start with Philippa.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here with all of you today. So, as was mentioned, I'm an advisor to the Department for International Trade. Our entire goal is securing economic prosperity, and that means supporting businesses with their growth ambitions, whether they're from the UK and going international, or as yourselves on the call this morning, from overseas and looking to set up in the UK. So that means everything from practical support and guidance. That means helping you to understand what the UK landscape is like and how to position your business. And it also means, as you scale, helping to tap into some of the networks that the department has, both in the public and private sector, in order to grow your business. I work particularly across the Asia Pacific. A couple of companies come to mind for particularly only with an Australia lens this morning. And so there's a business called Stake. They facilitate retail investors trading US stocks in markets around the world. They set up last year in the UK, and the support there was really around firstly helping them to understand sort of how to navigate what's already quite a competitive market, getting the right information, doing the right research before they came and landed on the ground. Secondly, when they did come to visit, connecting them into the right people, so the likes of trade associations, the likes of potential partners that they might look to work with in the UK, and obviously the regulators. And we can talk more about the regulatory environment in the UK later, but it's a great strength that we have this collaboration and interplay between the private sector and regulators, and a really strong dialogue. So connecting State into the FCA and making sure that process from initial contacts to getting a license was smooth was something that we worked on there. We've also helped companies from Hong Kong like PolyDigi, who are more about digital identity, to connect with RBS and set up an incubator in Edinburgh there. So we're really whole of the UK, and a number of others, you know, either looking for partnerships or looking to come and establish themselves here.
Thanks, Philippa. And over to Deval Gore.
Hi, thank you, Paul, and thanks to the newfound team for giving me the opportunity, and hi to everyone on the call. Hi, my name is Deval Gore. I work for an organisation called London Partners. London Partners is the Mayor of London's official promotional agency. We do a whole host of things across the whole spectrum of attracting investment and businesses, congresses, students and visitors, which clearly has been challenged this year, but that's our role, to try and attract those folks and those investments into London and helping them to set up and grow in London. My role specifically within London and Partners is running a technology scale-up program called the Mayor's International Business Program, which is there to help ambitious high-growth scale-ups who have a presence in London to launch out of London into new territories and new markets across the globe. And we're supported then by the Mayor and a host of other corporates such as Lloyds Bank, Microsoft, and KPMG. I will keep it simple. I don't work on the FDI side. However, I have been told by my FDI teams that we have got some name dropping to be done here. We've helped companies such as Stripe, which I'm sure you know is in the payment space. We've also helped companies like a company called Wealthsimple, which is in the digital wealth management space. How we've helped them, and we'll probably get into this later, Paul and Philippa, we've kind of helped them with regards to helping them with the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of setting up in London for a network of commercial partners, plugging them into the fintech and wider technology sector, and giving them a bit of an assessment and research and insights into what the UK market has to offer from a consumer perspective. One other company, certainly from my side, and I'll leave it here, is we've certainly helped overseas companies that have a presence in the UK, London specifically, join the program and then connect them into international markets, which sounds peculiar, but London is a launchpad into new markets, as we know. So one company that we helped that I was thrilled about was a company called Jumio, which is in the biometrics ID space from the West Coast, who's got an office here in London. And we helped them to connect into a number of UK and overseas corporates through our endeavours, particularly from getting them onto our exhibition stand at the Sibos conference last year.
Brilliant. And for those who don't know Sibos, it's spelled S-I-B-O-S. Won't be held this year, but certainly worth researching if you want to interact in the banking and supply the global banks as a fintech. It's certainly worth investigating as a conference. My name's Paul Webster, CEO of International Investment Services. My group was founded on helping Aussie Kiwi companies initially come to the UK, supporting the British government. It's now global, supporting all markets, all sectors. And I wear two hats. One, like Philippa, a specialist supporting DIT, helping you navigate your market entry. The other one is the private sector as a private consultant, helping firms by project managing every element in juggling establishing in the UK. For me, two of the queries we find, particularly in the space of fintechs and those regulated, such as an e-license, e-money license, or other form of FCA, is really this sequence of how do I get regulated, get a bank account, get my staff moving. I can't get my FCA license, so I get a bank account, but I can't get a bank account until I get my FCA license. Working with Philippa and Deval, that's certainly a service at DIT that we've navigated. We know how to work that solution. So that's certainly a common problem that's no longer a problem. It's just navigating the pathway, and we have a solution to share with you. And then the other one that I touched on, which I think Deval and Philippa have both provided great insight, is regulation, understanding what is regulated, what is not. And then secondly, the global platform from the UK, and that the presence of the UK's fintech market gives you effectively a badge of quality as you go global from the UK. And certainly one of the great attractive elements of the UK is the fact that the footprint is in 175 cities. It's the world's largest trade promotion agency, and you come to Britain to prosper globally. And certainly that will be one of the messages you get through this delegation at that time. I want to put it back to the, I guess, leading why the UK is so amazing, such a great place for business, still the #1 location in Europe for foreign direct investment to grow a business, clearly a market leader in fintech globally. But to Deval, I'll start at a national level, and what do we see? So I'll start with Philippa, then I'll come to Deval. So we'll go national, then into London. What is the UK government doing, Philippa, to support overseas fintechs looking to scale to the UK?
Absolutely. So, I mean, Paul, you've outlined a lot of things we work on already. I would say there is support for you at whatever stage of the journey you're at, right? We're looking at the UK, we think it's an interesting market, we want to learn more. Can you help us do some research, perhaps? In a normal time, visit the UK. In a not so normal time, I guess, participate in virtual missions, build that knowledge base, build that evidence base for you to then start making a plan to come and set up here. At that point, so I guess the intermediate stage of your journey, DIT has project managers. So for companies that are looking to scale here, we have a service called IST, and they provide practical support, consultancy services for free in order to help you establish your business, as Paul has said, sort of navigate some of these tricky questions about what to do in which order, think about things like office space, think about things like talent, and specialists like ourselves to help you with the licensing process. And then if you're looking to, for example, move your headquarters here, we have a service called the Global Entrepreneurs Programme, which there are people based out in a number of markets, including in Australia, who really source incredibly high quality talent and entrepreneurs who are looking to, as Paul said, sort of have the UK as a hub for your global growth. And they really help you as you expand to build your business network, to look at potential clients or potential partners, and to sort of navigate that ecosystem. And then as you start to put footprint on the ground here, we run events, we kind of cultivate that community so that you remain connected to other entrepreneurs and you can continue to build that network, to work with trade associations, to see the opportunity up and down the country with the likes of the National Network, the Fintech Scotland, the Fintech North, and really plug into everything that Fintech in the UK is.
Nice. And I guess a clarity for our audience, Philippa, does DIT execute things for people, or is it an information-only basis?
So it depends what you mean by execute. We don't do business development for people. We provide a lot of information, but we also kind of handhold you through some of those practical steps. So there are different services depending on what the question is. I think it's helpful.
I think you got it there, Philippa. And I think Peter's got a session on business development later as well, but that's one of the important parts. DIT will introduce you into the ecosystem, navigate you through it, but they're not there to do your business development. So that's just an important segregation in where the line stops. Deval in London, the world's fintech centre. What is it London and Partners can do to support these amazing firms coming in?
Well, I'd kind of follow on from what Philippa was saying and echo the services that they provide. And it's worth just stressing that London and Partners are intertwined with DIT and the work that they do across the country and around the globe. We are, for the folks on this call, you should consider us the one team and shouldn't look to segment us, because we work very, very closely hand in glove. But again, what Philippa was saying, we've got a dedicated team that support overseas companies setting up in London specifically, again, working with the DIT teams. We've also got teams across the world, not as extensive as DIT, so we leverage DIT's kind of capabilities in markets that we're not in. In the markets we are in, just to wrap them off, we're in North America, which includes Canada, Toronto, San Francisco, LA, New York, and Chicago. We're in India, we're in China, we're in France and Germany. And as I said, we've got insights and connections, not just with DIT, but through commercial connections into various other markets as well. So a dedicated team overseas that work very, very closely with a dedicated team in my office in London Bridge. And what do they offer? Again, going back to what was said before, we provide insights to help you start business planning and start preparing your market entry strategy. We provide connections, because that's vital. Acutely aware, particularly in the fintech sector, is incredibly tightly knit. I'm not just talking about London, by the way, I'm talking about globally. So we're very aware that who we know, you know as well, but that's a good thing and that's a positive. Also worth kind of remembering, we've noting that we've assembled a network of commercial partners that can help with the whole of the nuts and bolts that Paul has just mentioned around licensing, about setting up, about legalities, compliance, finding an office, finding talent, etc., etc. We've got around 40 to 50 commercial partners that we've onboarded that are best in class in what they do. So again, network. And then I think it's vitally important what Philippa said at the end, that peer network. So we're plugged into the fintech community here in London, and very, very happy to plug overseas fintechs who are looking to enter the UK market into connections that we have, whether that's on the corporate side, fintech, startup, or scale up.
Thanks, Deval. And going back to this going global from Britain, how is it both nationally and at LNP that well, I'll start with Deval, you're on the line, so we'll keep you there. What do London and Partners do to help the firms prosper globally? So they get into the UK ecosystem, they've got that badge. What can LNP do to help them prosper across the EU and the rest of the world?
Yeah, and that's where it comes into my territory, Paul. Like I said, I run a technology scale-up program, which is essentially embedded within London and Partners. We're governed slightly differently and we're funded slightly differently, but it's very much part of the London Partners service offering. It's a 12-month program. It's at no cost. It's fully funded, interestingly, by the EU, match funded by corporate partners, as I said, such as Lloyds Bank, KPMG, and Microsoft. Once you've come onto so essentially, let's talk about the journey. An overseas company, a fintech from Australia, for example, sets up in London, starts building out their team and London presence. We already have the relationship with you because we've kind of helped you in some shape or form in setting up in London. And then you come speaking to my team, to me, around using London as a launchpad, as you said, into Europe, often into the US. That's a fairly standard entry from London because of the connections we have with the US here. We'll help you with connections into our mentors, into our corporates who I've just mentioned. We run meet the corporates, meet the investors, meet the mentors on an ongoing basis throughout the entire 12 months. We've been running about 3 or 4 of these events nearly every week, albeit virtually right now. And then a major plank, answering your question, Paul, is we run these what we call trade missions. Again, very similar to our friends at DIT, often working in conjunction with our friends at DIT, where we physically take groups of companies in a specific sector, such as fintech, into a new market, say North America, Germany, France, India, wherever it may be, and fully expose them, immerse them into that market. Again, similar to what we do domestically, connections, corporates, investors, advisors, agencies such as ours who are there to help.
And Philippa, there's been a big announcement over the last couple of years, a large initiative that's helping and simplify the expansion, leveraging the support Deval's providing. Can you expand on what it is DIT, specifically in the fintech space, can do to help them grow globally?
Absolutely. I would just echo some of what Deval said around sort of trade missions and that structure. Ultimately, what we want to do is accelerate the process for you in getting to know a new market, into understanding what it's like to do business there, how your product might fit, and who the people are you need to connect into, and providing you that network, right? And we work collectively. You'll hear, obviously, London Partners, you'll hear Department of International Trade, you'll hear the City of London Corporation, you'll hear the likes of Innovate Finance. We all work as one collective group to say how can we most effectively support the sector, whether that's growing into the UK or growing from the UK as this kind of global platform. In terms of partnerships, and I think international partnerships are really important to kind of facilitate this. The UK government for the last few years has been signing fintech bridges, and those are a commitment at a government level, at a regulatory level, so between the Financial Conduct Authority and a regulator in another market, and thirdly at an ecosystem level, so between all of this kind of Team UK group of organisations and our counterparts in another market, to say what are the challenges of expanding internationally as a fintech between, for example, Australia and the UK, or the UK and Singapore, or to develop a point between the UK and the US. What can government do to reduce some of those market access barriers, whether it's, as Paul's mentioned, sort of the opening a bank account, whether it is connecting it to the right people, whether it is things like data sharing and privacy. What can the government do to make that easier? What can the regulators do to kind of reduce unnecessary burden in the licensing process? So the FCA would refer you to another regulator and say, this is an innovative business operating in the UK, they're doing a fantastic job, they're meeting all of their obligations, they might be appropriate for your market. And so that's sort of an introduction on the regulatory side. And then the ecosystem piece is really bringing together fintech associations, bringing together the private sector, all of the groups that Deval mentioned, the investors, the corporates, to connect in together and to give you that initial network when you cross a bridge. So we have bridges with Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Korea. We do a lot of work in ASEAN, with a partnership also with the US, and a number of routes obviously through Europe and into Canada as well. So really those international partnerships at a government, regulatory and market level are there to kind of facilitate your growth and to act as a well-trodden path effectively for you guys to go across.
On the fintech bridge, Philippa, could you just expand? What are the tangible benefits? Like, is there a speed? I mean, what is it these businesses will get? So the 30 odd we've got on the line, what are they going to get by working with DIT to ensure that when they go and they're using the fintech bridge, what their expectations should be?
Absolutely. So there is a kind of increased level of support, both from ourselves, and as Paul said, we've got people in 175 countries, there's 175 cities, 109 countries around the world. There, in places where we have a bridge, we have somebody specifically focused on fintech and financial services who's really embedded in the ecosystem who can help you with that growth process. You have commitment from the government, and at times we've written letters of support for companies. We've directly engaged with regulators to actually try and smooth that path for businesses. There's all of the practical support, so we work with law firms and consultancies to give you pro bono support. And there's this network, there's kind of the brand associated with it means that people understand what working with companies coming across a bridge means. It's almost it helps you to build trust effectively. It gives people an understanding of where you're coming from, that there's been some validation of your business model, and that there's this network of support to really assist you when you go across.
Thanks for Philippa on that one. Yeah, of course, Deval.
Oh, Paul, sorry, just to kind of come in there. Around the fintech bridges, I'm glad Philippa has kind of described it as a brand. I mean, I've travelled around the world over the last 2 years, taking groups of fintech companies to different markets, and categorically say that the fintech bridge is very, very well known and highly respected. And that's in markets where we don't have the fintech bridge, where they want the fintech bridge. So I think it's that without getting over dramatic, it's that gold-plated credibility that comes from knowing that X company from London has been through, is part of this kind of community, has gone through the rigors of the FCA licensing scrutiny, has come out the other end, has built a good business and looking to enter said market. So I think people shouldn't underestimate how important that is.
And you both touch on the regulator and really the symbol of trust. And I think one of the elements that underpins the UK ecosystem is the trust of the British brand. And an example to this might be the Brexit referendum. Everyone might think that was a bad thing for Britain, but not in financial markets. For those who might recall, June 23 that night, it set global trading volumes around the world, and the system worked. Not one currency pair, not one commodity, not one financial asset had to stop trading. And 3 days later, it all had to be settled, and the system works. And that is that robustness you get of being a UK regulated firm. Even in the United States, they had to shut down some of the financial pairs that were being traded, but not in London, where it was deemed to be the place that was going to be at risk. And that gives you an evidence of how strong the brand is, the trust between counterparties is. On that, it's all heavily related to the regulator. And I just want to come to you both on what is the biggest challenge in working with the regulator? And is it a challenge or is it an advantage here in the UK versus other markets? Deval, you're on the screen. I'll start with you.
I can speak through the experience that some of our companies have gone through. I mean, is it a challenge? I would say no. It's an opportunity, but persevere, and you need lots of patience, and you need to ensure that you're prepared for the time and effort to go through the process and build those relationships with the FCA folks. So I think the challenge is simply it is what you need to do. You know, this is the UK. It's a very well governed landscape, and you have to engage the regulator if you are applying for a license, whatever that license may be. But I'll just repeat what I said before. Once you've gone through the rigor of applying for an FCA, you can go around the world and shake that around. That's a badge of honor, and that's well respected globally. So no, it's an opportunity.
Philippa, anything to expand on?
Yeah, I would say the same thing, really. It's because of everything we've said, you need to prove that what you're doing is not going to harm consumers, is going to be positive for the market. And, you know, we have the competition mandate here. The FCA is very open to new entrants coming in with solutions that would be better for consumers, or, you know, if you're in the B2B space, better for a business as a consumer. And will improve the whole market and the whole ecosystem. There's a lot of initiatives within Innovate within the FCA. So there's direct support for companies who are applying and have an innovative business model. There is the regulatory sandbox. There is the launch recently of a digital sandbox, and there's going to be a pilot specifically on things around identifying fraud, identifying vulnerable consumers, and SME finance in the next couple of months. So there are ways that you can test your solution. There will be scrutiny, but it's a collaborative approach, I think, from the FCA, and they want innovation in the market. Like, I guess that's the difference versus a lot of our international counterparts.
No, I think the Project Innovate, the sandbox, is a great call out. For those who think they're doing something new and different, certainly look onto FCA, just type Project Innovate, it'll come up. To learn more about it. And it certainly is why the UK has stepped ahead. Going back to 2010, 2012, Project Innovate was found, and that enabled the confidence to build the trust of innovation inside the fintech market. And again, it's that regulator providing trust. And they would say the world's most supportive regulator, and I would agree thoroughly in that approach. For those who are innovating to the UK, it's worth calling out that you can enter in a light model. If you're not necessarily innovating, but you want to bring your product into the UK market with a certain niche, there's certainly for certain products such as e-money licenses, you can operate under an umbrella license. You pay a monthly fee. You don't have to wait to go through the FCA process. There are different market entry strategies that let you come in to trial and test in a beta mode before you truly invest in the FCA authorization, which in itself isn't that prohibitive in the sense it's, depending on your license, 3 to 9 months if it's a non-banking license to be up and running. So again, thinking about the umbrella license, if you are going down a payment pathway, maybe that's a good approach to trial your product before you invest in the full FCA license. Perhaps you run them parallel. Perhaps you go with an umbrella license while you go through the longer process of the FCA. A last question in regulation, Philippa. Who do I approach first? Is it DIT? Do I go straight to the FCA, or do I engage with one of Deval's commercial partners to help me navigate the process? What is the sequence and who do I speak to first?
I think it honestly depends what stage you're at. We are always happy to have a conversation and help sort of direct you as to what might be an appropriate path. We won't give you legal advice because we're not all lawyers, but we can direct you as to what's an appropriate route to take. I would say getting your ducks in a line before you speak to the FCA is sensible. They're always willing to have a chat, particularly if you are a very innovative business and there are questions around how would this actually work in the UK. They're open to having that conversation, but it always makes sense to be quite clear on what's your proposition, how do you think it's going to work here before you go and approach them, because that's just going to streamline the process when you get there.
And you only get one chance to make a good impression the first time. Deval, anything to expand on?
Yeah, I was just going to say what's really interesting from my perspective is how the FCA over the recent years have really built up their understanding and knowledge base. Have got some highly capable individuals who know your industry and know your technologies. And what I find really interesting is how they're also now splitting into various subsectors. So one that's come up recently for me, certainly, and certainly very relevant considering the year we've been going through with the pandemic, is around red tech. So now they've got a dedicated red tech team within the FCA that is keen to engage with innovative software providers who are helping certainly the corporates with their compliance issues and looking to automate a lot of that back office functionality, which is obviously something that's come up quite a bit as an exposure from an analog perspective this year, where things need to be fixed. So I think engage with the FCA as soon as you can, particularly if you genuinely believe you have an innovative product that requires an early doors engagement with a regulator like the FCA. And then, I mean, Philippa could talk about the GFIN, but I think that's also a fascinating space where the UK can kind of lead on that space as well.
Yeah, nicely done. Bruce, I see your question. What we would say to that is you need to engage the FCA as a potential customer as you would anyone else. That means you're going to have to get the network in. The people who work on regulatory approval will be different from their purchasing managers. So again, getting the right people into that. Yes, there's a free information service at DIT on visas and migration. Peter can connect you with myself and we can take you into the migration team. We provide free information. They won't complete it for you, but they will give you the information and direct you to the application forms. Or you can engage with a commercial partner to support you and prepare it to ensure it gets through first time. Moving on to other questions.
Sorry,
we've got 10
Paul,
and 15. Yeah.
There's one other question I can see here regarding fintech focused hubs from Lance. Are there any fintech focused hubs, incubators where presumably he can set up from initial footprint? The answer is yes. There's the obvious one, certainly for us in London, which is Level 39. We've got Barclays Rise in central London. So I'm not sure how we're kind of sharing information, but we've got quite a useful map that we can send and send to your folks, and you can kind of make some inquiries thereafter.
You'll be drowning in opportunity in London with financial services accelerators, so they will take good care of you there. We've touched on some of the challenges, but I just want to go on recent times in the pandemic. The impacts on the UK scene. Some people might be hesitant. What have been the impacts, positive or negative, on the UK fintech scene? Val?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, I mean, we've kind of tired of saying this, but it's been an interesting year. It's been a tough year, right? And the fintech sector is not immune to the impact of the pandemic. I mean, but we think in many aspects of fintech, many companies have clearly shown they're resilient to weathering the storm. But the biggest challenge, if you like, is around capital raising. Let's not be coy about that. I think a lot of investors, and this is not a UK phenomenon, Paul. This is happening across the world, I think, where investors are keeping their powder dry and becoming a little bit more discerning, are asking a lot more questions, are asking things about path to profitability, and are looking for resilient business models. Now, you could argue why that should have been those questions from pre-COVID, but of course there was different times. So I think there are challenges, there are some headwinds, but I would also say there are some very clear tailwinds as well, with lots of companies in certain spaces. I would say particularly in red tech, in the wealth management space, in payments. We had a company called checkout.com when we went into lockdown that raised £250 million. Now that was in track pre-COVID, but nevertheless it's something to shout about. So I think it's really incumbent on the fintech community generally, but particularly newcomers, to ensure they are very clear with their product offering, differentiation, and how they are looking to generate income. Not now, but clear sights as to how they're going to do that before they engage the VC community or any investor community.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And to expand on that capital raising, phrases that you'll certainly get asked straight away is the funding, how much runway does that provide? 12 months would be an absolute minimum on any presentation. 18 months is giving investors more confidence. And I think that certainly on the capital raising, it's created opportunity. We've seen some thrive. And I think Philippa has got some great examples of other firms who've done well in recent times. Philippa, what have you seen with the impact on COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, we're fortunate. If you compare fintech to a lot of other sectors, as Deval said, there's been tailwinds as well as headwinds. And most firms are completely set up to work remotely for their dev teams to push products to clients from wherever they are in the world, from home. So the disruption from a business environment perspective has not been so great. There's also been, if you look at the B2B space, kind of a proof of the business model and of the need for digitalization of financial services. A lot of big institutions having to do regulated activity from home, sending traders home, and basically needing to rapidly adopt new ways to do business or to maintain their business and their support of their clients. I think 75% of major banks had to either entirely throw their business continuity plan out the window or drastically change it in order to keep going through COVID. So that gives you an idea of the wake-up call from a B2B perspective. From a consumer perspective, if you're in the B2C space, consumer behaviours have changed, and there's also a kind of increased adoption of technology. People who've been on furlough have had more time, they've been looking at things like online trading, and so uptake of certain business models has accelerated. I think consumers are becoming more sophisticated as well. What they demand from a fintech company is changing. So if we use the kind of trading space as an example, you have people at the very early stage who say, I want to start doing this, but I'd like the platform that I'm working with to teach me a bit before I actually put my money into it. You have people at the opposite end who are very sophisticated investors and already know what they're doing and just want low fees. So I think there's opportunity. I think in incredibly saturated markets, you will have consolidation. You're already seeing acquisitions of businesses. We're already seeing conversations about mergers, and I think that will continue, particularly, as Deval said, as the funding environment remains tight. Some of those smaller players will get snapped up by the larger ones. But you have, if you look at Onfido, they're a big household name in the UK. They're focused on digital identity. There is a large round at the beginning of this year as well. You've seen Revolut. A number of big UK players are securing these vast funding rounds, 20 million, 100 millions. And so the money is still flowing, but the justification for your business has to be there. So I would say accelerated adoption by consumers, challenge on the opposite side of that being, are your customers focused on adopting your product right now, or are they worried about their internal operations continuing? And then there's still opportunity in the capital space if you go for the right story.
Great. And certainly, yeah, go Deval.
Sorry, Paul, I keep interrupting you. Philip was making such good points, is making me think as well. Just one thing, I think the B2B space, and which is where I spend most of my time. A lot of the companies on our program are B2B players, less than the B2C. I mean, we are the conversations we're having with corporates both here in the UK and overseas leads us to believe, and this is probably stating the bleeding obvious to everyone on this call, that the larger banks and FIs will be actively seeking digital solutions, right? They're looking to fix some of the problems that have been exposed during the pandemic, particularly around back office functions. But be under no illusions, they are also getting quite sophisticated themselves in terms of their knowledge and understanding. They will not just simply sign up the first partner that knocks on the door. They are building some very, quite rightly, good systems and processes when looking to onboard, when looking to recruit. To understand, certainly in the UK, the sales cycles have always been, but continue to be long. And also first contact, there's a discerning factor amongst particularly the innovation bods who are the gatekeepers into the banks around, upfront costs, multi-year commitments on contracts. All of these things are being scrutinized as to how you engage. And you've got to be you've got to be seen to be showing some real sticky solutions. We're not looking for visual customer interface stuff, which is great. This is the reason why the likes of Thought Machine, for example, is doing so incredibly well, because that banking as a service, which has now become the big buzz term in fintech, is I think quite rightly where a lot of FIs will be heading, and we're looking for solutions for.
Yeah, and I mean, an example of where we're all seeing the maturity, someone like a Metro Bank's announcement last week that their applications will challenge the fintechs at their 15-minute new business bank accounts for sole director shareholder companies. That will be a land speed record by any regulated bank here in the UK, and an example where the fintechs now probably can't match it or will be very similar. So you also have to really be working to support them. We haven't got much time before we go into the rooms. I'll just quickly address Dilip. Yes, of course, the FCA will consider international companies, but your application may require regulated or authorised persons who must be resident in the UK. So you can start the journey, but that will depend on the licence you're going for. Certainly, there is no barrier to starting that conversation, but you might need to engage with commercial partners to get the FCA's attention in that regard. Moving on to the other questions. What financial support is available? Now, I can touch on the fact that the UK has a fantastic corporate tax regime, the leading in the G20. It's a 19% corporate tax, of which there is no withholding tax on dividends. So therefore, £100 profit, pay £19 tax, and £81 can go off to shareholders around the world. We have fantastic R&D incentives, particularly for SMEs. So that's people with fewer than 500 staff. You can get a third of your R&D investment back in cash, or you can get a 230% super deduction. There's information on our website, or again, come back to Newfound and we can share more specific information. Patent Box gives you a 10% corporate tax rate. It's certainly incredibly attractive in that regard. We also know that in some regions, they might have some free training, maybe a landing spot. But is there anything specifically for fintechs or other regions that you can support these firms coming into the UK or in London? Deval, you're on the screen. I'll start with you and then move to Philippa.
Thank you, Paul.
Should have gone the other way around.
No, that's okay. Well, let's start with me first. I mean, I think, notwithstanding all of the great stuff that you've just mentioned, Paul, which quite frankly in itself makes the UK hugely attractive. This year has been interesting. We've had, for folks who don't know, the UK government created a new fund called the Future Fund, which is a convertible loan that matches funds raised from venture investors. But obviously you have to be here, you have to have a presence here, you have to go through an application process. And of course, the big point of that particular exercise is you have to be engaged with investors who are looking to match the funds that you're going to receive from the UK government. And the fintech community, by the way, as I understand, have been a big recipients of this fund. I think there's about £600 million of this future fund. Maybe around half goes to the broad church that is called Fintech. So that exists, but obviously you have to, as overseas investors, fintechs have to be here. I would say from the funding side, Paul, all that aside, everything about the UK landscape is attractive enough. We've got a highly progressive regulatory system. We've got the laws in place to ensure that you can execute on your project, and we've got a highly adopted society. So I think all the things that everyone on this call understands, and there's a reason why they're on this call in the first place. So yes, there's probably pockets of money available, but for me, don't be distracted. Come in with a very, very clear plan. Raise your investment either where you are coming from or perhaps where you're coming to, and then build your team and then execute.
And I'd expand to say that myth busting that London is expensive. Yes, it can be if you want the flashiest sophist in the middle. Of course, as in any global city, it would be expensive. But you'll be pleasantly surprised how low a cost you can get office space in London. Equally, to Deval's point, it's a world's leading ecosystem and it's Europe's largest venture capital market. So if you want capital, you want contracts, there really is no competition.
No, I agree. And the co-working space providers, Paul, have done a really good job in ensuring the cost of setting up, physical setup, is lessened in terms of your cost. So yeah, don't. And of course, there are dedicated fintech hubs, as I mentioned before, such as Level 39, where you're not only getting a cost-effective space to set up and grow your team, but you're also you're killing two birds. You then plug into the fintech community at the same time. And also, it'd be remiss of me not to say 250 global banks are in London, right? So if you're selling into corporate land, they're on your doorstep when you come to London. Notwithstanding, it will take a little bit of time to engage with them and go through the sales cycle process, but they are here.
As well as more sovereign wealth funds than any other city in the world. It's all there. I'm going to come back to you with one question shortly, Deval. Your number one tip for the audience. I'll let you think on that while I go to Philippa. Philippa, any specific funding opportunities out there in the fintech scene at a national level?
Yeah, I would just say on top of what's already been said, obviously Innovate UK provides grants often linked to research and development and sort of technology-focused activity for your business, definitely. If you're then using the UK as a launchpad, you have UK Export Finance, who also look to support companies that are exporting the UK as a base. And the national hubs will provide some sort of grants to kind of establish your business there, to hire talent, etc. So there's a range of things on offer, but I would just echo what's been said by Deval in terms of you come here because of the business opportunities, not because we're going to throw cash at you to convince you to do it.
The big calling card of the world's largest market. One top tip for people who are still in an innovation development stage, do look at Innovate UK's website. There are calls for research funding on a weekly basis. Some 20 to 50 million is allocated every week. You should Google Innovate UK, sign up to their mailing list, and you'll be informed of every new research program, and you can select based on whether it's regulatory, building efficiency, productivity, or specifically linked to financial services. But that certainly is one of the biggest sources of funding that the British government is doing. We're not so much into handouts, it's very much about development of already an incredibly efficient and competitive system. So welcome you to compete. International applicants are available. You must have a UK company, but everything else from there, you can still be entirely offshore, and I've personally helped over 6 companies receive their Innovate UK funding whilst the founders are still in their home market. They did have a UK company registered and they're ready to go. Philippa, as we go into our private rooms, one last top tip for our guests this morning or this afternoon, wherever they may be.
Well, other than reach out to all of us for the support that we can offer, I would say do your research, do your homework. There's, if you're having a quieter time because of COVID, you obviously can't travel here, or most countries are kind of have travel restrictions of a certain extent. It's a bit harder to meet people in person if you're trying to do business somewhere new. Do the research. There's loads of information out there. Think about how your business and your product will fit in this market and work on the plan of attack effectively. And there are things that you can do to lay the groundwork if you're sure that you want to set up here. Paul can help, I can help, Deval can help with laying that groundwork so that when you really come here, you can hit the ground running. I think this is a perfect time to be spending time doing that.
Thank you, Philippa. I'll let you head off to your meeting room and I'll finish out with Deval. Your top tip.
Everything Philippa said. But
easy.
No, but I just, come talk to us. I mean, because quite frankly, it's not going to cost you anything. We're a fully costed free service and there to help, there to attract overseas companies to the UK. And again, what Philippa said, do your homework, fully understand that the UK market is a highly dynamic, mature market. It's highly competitive as well. So you have to understand where you fit in to this ecosystem. There are some incredible companies here. There's some incredible companies on this call as well. So you're going to have to find your space because, as you know, you're all moving at pace. And then find a partner. That always works. That's the sort of a 101 market entry ploy, right? So if you see a competitor, flip it. They could be a partner.
On that note, first of all, thank you very much to Philippa, Paul, and Deval. They got off to their virtual rooms, and please go and join them because there's tons more knowledge they have, and it's very rare to be able to access people like that. And what I can say also, when you are able to fly, all 3 are very social, and will buy you wine and beer and cups of coffee and tea and so forth. Obviously, we'll pay for it, but no, listen, it's great to have them as part of the program, and go and meet them in the rooms. Have those questions which I know are more specific about yourself. And then the session, second session starts at 9:30, so we'll ask you to be back in time for that. And that's around the sort of industry networks and people you need to know. That session will be led by my colleague Julian Blake and his 3 panelists, Olivia Minnick, Karen Sandu, and Amy French. Once again, tons of knowledge, tons of insights which you can tap into. So go and join the speakers, go and meet them, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.